All right, our notes for today are parallel lines and a transversal. They will be pages 17 and 18 in your notes. Make sure that you get your table of contents filled out and fill out your page numbers. We're going to put our blue parallel lines notes on page 18 and make sure you give that page a title as well. All right, I'm going to tape it in so that it's horizontal in my notebook, so I'm going to flip my notebook over. The first thing I want you to do is number each of your flaps with the angle that that flap represents. So, for example, this flap is number 1 because it's next to angle number 1 in our diagram. And then I'm going to open all of my flaps up so that I can see inside. And we're going to do a little bit of labeling on the inside. I'm going to use 2 colored pencils for this note. We need to be able to name and describe the relationships between these angles. And one way we do that is to talk about, first of all, our parallel lines. So let's label with our parallel line symbol that these two are our parallel lines, and go ahead and label them. And draw arrows to your parallel lines. And remember that the other line, the line crossing the parallel lines, is our transversal. So we can describe these angles based on whether they are inside the parallel lines, which means on the interior between our 2 parallel lines. So I'm going to color everything that's between my 2 parallel lines in orange, and that will be the interior of our diagram. So just lightly shade that in, and let's go ahead and label that as interior. Which means that everything, all of the angles that are not on the interior are on the exterior. So I'm going to change colors and shade the exterior outside of the parallel lines. We're going to shade in green. I used green. I don't care what color you use, but let's go ahead and label both of those sections as exterior. And remember that that relationship is describing that it's exterior of those parallel lines. It's outside the parallel lines. Okay, so then we can also talk about whether the angles are on the same side of the transversal. For example, 4 and 7 are on the same side of the transversal. Or we can talk about whether they are on alternate sides, so opposite sides of the transversal. So I'm going to go ahead and label across that transversal the word alternate. And I'm going to go back and forth so I remember that alternate means back and forth across that transversal line. Okay, so alternate just means that you have one angle on one side of the transversal and another angle on the other side of the transversal. So 4 and 2 would be an example of alternate angles. All right, let's fold our flaps together and we'll start talking about how we can describe angle relationships. So let's look at angle number 1 first. We can also describe angles as corresponding. So for example, corresponding would mean that if within this group of 4 angles, angle 1 is sort of in the upper left-hand corner. If we look at the other group of 4 angles, angle 5 is also in the upper left-hand corner. So those 2 angles, angle 1 and angle 5, are corresponding. So on flap number 1, we have angle number 1. We just said that angle 5 is corresponding to angle number 1. Okay. So the next one we're going to look for is an alternate exterior angle. Well, alternate, we said it had to be on the opposite side of the transversal line, and exterior, alternate exterior would be like angle number 8. So 1 and 8 are alternate exterior angles. Same side exterior, so angle 1 is on the same side as 2, 5, and 6, but only angle 6 is exterior. So angle 1 is same side exterior as angle 6. All right, our next relationship is vertical angles. We've already talked about vertical angles, that they are angles across an intersection from each other. So angle 1 would be a vertical angle with angle 4. Okay. All right. So what I would like you to do is on the other angles, do exactly what we did for number 1. Okay. Flip it open, read the relationships. So for number 2, figure out which angles would be corresponding. And then you're going to write in angle 2 is corresponding to angle number 6. Okay, and you'll fill in all of the angles for each of these. I would recommend you fill them in pencil because we're going to check them and make sure that they're correct, because we don't want you to have the wrong angles marked in your notebook. Okay. On page 17, I want you to list an example. So you're going to draw an example on page 17 of each of these relationships. So draw okay, so for example, we would draw our parallel lines. Make sure that you mark them as parallel. Draw the transversal. And let's say we wanted to do corresponding. So I could mark this angle and this angle as corresponding. They're in the same location in each of those groups of 4 angles. So you'll do that, oops, I need a G. You'll do that for each of those relationships, corresponding, alternate interior, oops, alternate exterior, same side interior, same side exterior, and what's the last one we're not? Vertical angles. And when you're done with that, you'll be done with your notes.